Every Satoshi counts. Don't be discouraged if you can't get to a whole Bitcoin or 0.5 Bitcoin, 0.1 Bitcoin, whatever it is. Stack whatever you can, because whatever you buy will eventually be worth a lot more than what it's worth today. In this video, I want to go through the math of why I think that Bitcoin is going to be worth a lot more and how many Satoshis most people will ever be able to get. Let's get started. I want to start with this spreadsheet that goes over the absolute basics. So one Bitcoin is worth 100 million Satoshis. In total, there will be 21 million Bitcoin, meaning there will be 2.1 quadrillion Satoshis in total. The current global population is about 8 billion people. The estimated population for 2050 is about 9.7 billion. And if we think about this from percentages of adoption, so if you have 25% adoption out of the entire world, so there's 8 billion people today, and let's say 2 billion people adopt Bitcoin, and you split that 19.8 million Bitcoin in total between every single person, in total, they're going to have 990,000 Satoshis. That's less than 0.01 Bitcoin. So again, one Bitcoin is worth 100 million Satoshis, and you can buy fractions of these Bitcoin amounts. If you count the lost coins and you subtract the total supply minus those lost coins by that 25% adoption number, in total, each person would have about 911,000 Satoshis. At 50%, the numbers drop to 495,000 Satoshis per person. At 75% adoption, so 6 billion people, you'd have 330,000 Satoshis per person. And at 100% adoption, at these current supply numbers, you'd have about 250,000 Satoshis per person, or 0.002475 Bitcoin per person. One of the reasons why I think that this Bitcoin that you buy, even if you buy very small amounts, will be increasing in value over time is because I know that the US government is going to continue to take on more and more debt. So all of these events here, 1929, 1930, you see the amount of debt that the US government has in total. In column D, you see the major events by presidential term. So in 1929, we had a market crash. In 1930, the amount of debt decreased by $1 billion because of this tariff act, which reduced trade. Over time, you can see here that the numbers keep getting bigger. So in 1929, the US government had $17 billion worth of debt. And over time, the number just keeps going up. So we can see here, 1942, it's up to 72 billion. In 1942, the US government tripled their defense spending. That's the reason that was given here. The US government's deficit in 1942 was $23 billion. And I think at this point, they kind of figured out that they can spend as much money as they want to because the world was using the US dollar as a reserve currency. So in 1943, they added $65 billion worth of debt. In 1944, they added $64 billion worth of debt, and so on. It keeps going, a few more years of negatives. But over time, you can see here that the number only goes up. It doesn't go down significantly. It may go down a year or two here and there, but in general, it only goes up. So it went from 17 billion up here to 1 trillion in 1982. Then in 1993, it was at 4.4 trillion. And then in 1997, it was at 5.4 trillion. In 2003, it was at 6.7 trillion. 2012 was at 16.066 trillion. And so on. 2024, it was at 35.4 trillion. In 2025, it's already at something like 37.3 trillion. So the deficit for 2025 has increased the debt by about $2 trillion already. And if we take a look at what these numbers look like, the increase in debt, this is what the chart looks like. So the increase in debt, you can see here, in the beginning, the numbers were pretty much irrelevant compared to what the numbers are looking like today. So at one point, the debt was increasing by $1 billion in a year. And more recently, it's increasing by $2,000 billion. So it's increased, the rate of increase has increased massively. It's accelerating and it'll keep accelerating. The reason why I'm showing you this is because we use debt as money. The currency that we use is essentially debt. The currency that we use is a debt issued by the Federal Reserve. It's backed by trust in the US government. The US government enforces its use as legal tender, and it promises that if you own it, at some point you can exchange it for goods and services. But the problem here is that the amount of currency in the system keeps rising, and it keeps rising, and it'll continue to rise literally forever. At some point, Just like the debt in 1955 is a rounding error today, just like the debt in 1982 is a rounding error. It increased by $144 billion in 1982, but today that number seems like a joke. We wish that the debt would only increase by $142 billion. And the reason why I went through all of that, the reason why I talked to you about the US debt is because, like I said, we're using the US debt as money. And over time, as more debt is issued and the US government goes further and further into debt, more of that money that they've borrowed into existence finds its way into Bitcoin. As the amount of money in the system rises, more and more people are willing to put more money into Bitcoin, and the numbers rise by orders of magnitude. They rise by 10 times every few years, and they'll continue to do this. And what you're doing when you buy Bitcoin is you're purchasing something that has a finite supply, while the money that it's valued in and the money that people are willing to earn today is an infinite supply asset. So, what will happen here? You're going to see that people who are earning US dollars will eventually want Bitcoin. And when they figure out what Bitcoin is, what is their income going to look like? How much money will be in the system? That's what I think you should be concerned with here. You should be concerned with the US government continuously increasing the amount of money in the system and continuously putting more and more money into people's hands so they can spend it on whatever they want to. The people who have excess money are going to try to find assets to buy so that they can preserve their purchasing power for the future. And Bitcoin is the best asset because it's the only asset that's truly finite. This spreadsheet is going to really help you put it into perspective. Every time you buy Satoshis, every time you exchange your US dollars or your rupees or your Canadian dollars or your yen, whatever you have, whatever, wherever, whichever country you're in, every time you exchange those currencies for Bitcoin, you're buying a fraction of a finite supply asset. So when you buy, let's say, 1,000 Satoshis, it doesn't seem like much. It's only 0.00001 Bitcoin, but you're buying a fraction of a finite supply of Satoshis. So the finite supply of Satoshis is 2.1 quadrillion. If you buy 1,000 Satoshis, you're buying a fraction of that 2.1 quadrillion, and nobody can change that. Nobody can dilute your holdings. While on the other hand, if you save in dollars, somebody can create more dollars, they can flood the system with more dollars, and they can dilute what you have. So we can see here 100 million Satoshis is 1 Bitcoin, 10 million Satoshis is 0.1 Bitcoin, a million Satoshis is 0.01 Bitcoin, and so on. So we have 100,000 Satoshis, 10,000 Satoshis, and the number goes all the way down to 1 Satoshi equals 0.00000001 Bitcoin. And I want you to understand how quickly the price of Bitcoin has risen. You might be thinking that, let's say today you can only afford 100,000 Satoshis or a million Satoshis, but at some point, that million Satoshis or that 100,000 Satoshis is going to be worth a lot more than whatever it's worth today. Today, a million Satoshis is worth something like 1,100 US dollars. 100,000 Satoshis is worth something like 110 US dollars. But you can see here in February of 2010, one Bitcoin, a whole Bitcoin, 100 million Satoshis was worth 1 penny. So $1 bought you 10 billion Satoshis, 100 Bitcoin. In July of 2010, just a few months later, Bitcoin's price went to 10 cents. Then February of 2011, it went to $1. June of 2011 went to $10. April of 2013, it was up to $100. November of 2013, it was up to $1,000. At this point, the Satoshis per dollar went to 100,000. It went from 10 billion to 100,000, and it keeps falling and it keeps falling, and it'll continue to fall for a very, very long time. At the time of this recording, one Bitcoin is worth about $112,000. So today, you can buy 893 Satoshis per dollar. Now, if we take a look at the percentage of the network that you're buying when you put $1 into Bitcoin, you can see that over time, the percentage is decreasing, and it'll continue to decrease for a very long time. So in February of 2010, you could buy 0.000476% of the entire network for $1. If you wanted to buy the same percentage of the network today, it would cost you $11.2 million. It went from a dollar to $11.2 million. A dollar to buy 100 Bitcoin to now $11.2 million to buy 100 Bitcoin and to own 0.00476% of the entire network. As Bitcoin's price increases, ownership of the same percentage of Bitcoin's network and total supply is costing you more and more, and it'll continue to cost more and more forever. In February of 2010, you could buy this percentage of the network. Today, $1 will buy you this percentage of the network. And you can see how different these numbers are, how many zeros are added to the right of the decimal. So you're owning a smaller and smaller percentage of the network every single time you buy Bitcoin. But you have to look at it from a different perspective. Every dollar that you put into Bitcoin has now increased in purchasing power. So if you started buying Bitcoin, let's say a few years ago, and you kept dollar cost averaging, you kept dollar cost averaging, and you kept buying more and more whenever you had a chance, whenever you got dollars, you bought a certain amount of Bitcoin, and you kept doing that for a very, very long time, your savings are now worth a significant portion of the entire network. So now the amount of Bitcoin that you bought in the past is worth significantly more than whatever you put into it because Bitcoin is going to increase in purchasing power over time in terms of US dollars forever. The interesting thing here is that over time, as Bitcoin's price rises, you're going to get fewer and fewer Satoshis per dollar. Today, you can buy 893 Satoshis per dollar. At some point, those 893 Satoshis are going to cost you $893. You can see here, I predicted that at some point Bitcoin will go to $100 million. And I think that's inevitable because the supply of the US dollar can increase forever and the supply of Bitcoin is never going to increase. So when you have this immovable force, this inelastic money that you can't increase the supply of, and the only way to make people sell it is to offer more things for it, the price of that thing has to go up. That currency has to keep increasing in value in order to continue to change hands. And when people buy Bitcoin, they expect a certain return. So they're not going to sell for, let's say, a few years, 5, 10, 15 years. Some people plan to never sell their Bitcoin again. And when this finite supply of Bitcoin doesn't move and all the billionaires, all the millionaires want some, they're going to bid the price of Satoshis up significantly. At $1 million, one Satoshi will be worth 1 cent. So $1 will buy 100 Satoshis. You're going to see that exchanges will very likely start advertising Satoshis rather than Bitcoin. So instead of saying Bitcoin is worth $1 million, you're going to see that Satoshis are worth 1 penny. When people see 1 penny, they're going to bid that up to 2 pennies. Then they're going to bid it up to 3 pennies. And just this small change will lead to a massive increase in the overall price of Bitcoin. So you're going to see that whatever Satoshis you accumulate today are going to be worth significantly more. And that growth is going to accelerate just like the US government debt. When you buy Bitcoin, you're essentially betting that this number will continue to rise. And you're betting that the US government will continue to be extremely, extremely irresponsible with its spending. And you're going to see that it will do this. And I think we're going to go through this over the next few years. I think the worst of inflation in the US dollar is ahead of us. The increases in costs that we saw in the past are going to be completely immaterial and they're going to be rounding errors compared to how much the cost of living increases in the future. Bitcoin is the only way to protect yourself. If you're saving in US dollars, you're setting yourself up for failure. You're setting yourself up for a trap where at some point the US government will have devalued the dollar so much that whatever you've saved in your entire life is worth nearly nothing. So every Satoshi you buy counts. Every time you hit the buy button, you're purchasing an asset that has a finite supply that nobody can increase the supply of. And all of the billionaires are eventually going to figure it out. Today, maybe they don't know what it is. Today, they may be telling you that this thing is worthless, it doesn't work, it's not worth owning. But at some point, when they do figure it out, they're going to want the Satoshis that you bought today for fractions of a penny, and they're going to be willing to pay you dollars for them. Because at some point, Bitcoin is going to be so valuable. At some point, there are going to be so many people chasing Bitcoin because they want to get out of the US dollar financial system. So stack as many Satoshis as you can. Whatever you can get, it doesn't matter if you can buy $1 a week, $2 a week, $5 a week. Everything adds up. I've made so many videos just explaining this. Even if you can buy $1 a month, it will add up. If you're putting $1 into Bitcoin every single month, you're buying about 900 Satoshis per month right now. And as the price goes up, you're going to be buying fewer and fewer Satoshis. But the Satoshis that you accumulate for $1 a month, $2 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month are going to buy you a house. They're going to allow you to take on loans against that Bitcoin so that you can get basically an infinite fiat machine going for yourself, just like the US government is able to do it for themselves. Stacking even small amounts of Bitcoin count, it matters. It will make a difference in your life at some point. Do whatever you can, of course, to accumulate more. If you can get to $100 a month, $200 a month, $500 a month, it will definitely make a difference in your life, because at some point, Bitcoin will be the most valuable asset in the world. Every single person on earth can benefit from owning Bitcoin. And once the majority of people figure it out, they're not going to be paying a dollar for 900 Satoshis. They're going to be paying a penny per Satoshi. They're going to be paying 2 pennies, 3 pennies, 5 pennies per Satoshi. And that number will rise by orders of magnitude because, again, just the root cause of this is that the US dollar is completely worthless.